In this video, we're going to build this salad bar side table. Hang in there. All right, we're going to start off here by milling up the cherry that we will be using for the top of the table. This cherry will be book matched. However, the two outer pieces of the tabletop will be only a couple of inches wide, so the book matching is not that important. Once we get everything cut to size and get everything nice and flat, we'll take this over to the bandsaw and we'll get it resawn here in a second. We're going to resaw these boards down to about 3/8 of an inch, and the final thickness we're going to go for is about 1/4 of an inch. I am laying these out to get an idea of what the grain pattern is going to look like. The plywood you see there is the substrate we're going to adhere this to once we get a little bit further along in the video. Now we're taking them through the drum sander, getting them good and flattened out, and we're going to then get them glued up. I'm using Type-On 3 here since this is going to be in a restaurant, and although I'm going to put polyurethane on the top, we want to make sure that the glue is rated for being wet. It's going to get a lot of abuse, I imagine. Don't forget to label your parts. Too many times I don't label my parts and I end up gluing them up in the wrong order, or I end up cutting them in the wrong direction. So yeah, my tip that I need to follow more often is label your parts and you can avoid situations like this. The blocks on the side are just to keep the panels aligned, and obviously the glue bottles and the fire extinguisher and the bricks are all meant to keep the panel flat while the glue dries. Now we'll clean up the dried up glue. I take a chisel, an old chisel, and just grind the end of it flat so it's not sharp, it's just blunt. And it works really well for pulling off the dried up glue. Back over to the drum sander and we'll get that panel flattened out. Here's a quick real-time shot of it coming out of our drum sander. We don't feed it real fast, don't like to gum up the paper. Just take it slow, let the paper do the work. Here I am milling up the stock we're going to eventually be using for the legs. I think what you'll find in this video is there's a lot of unnatural order of operations, meaning I didn't video all of one physical operation. I jumped around to a lot of different milling operations, and you'll you'll see that here. And of course, everything has to be square and flat. The top of this table is going to be made up of 3/4 inch plywood adhered to a piece of 1/2 inch plywood. And on top of all of that will be the 1/4 inch cherry veneer that I've glued up already. This is me just cutting the 1/2 inch panel, I believe. And we'll glue the two plywood panels together using contact cement. Once we get our panel cut to size, we'll give it a good rough sanding. I think I'm sanding it to 120 grit here. This is AC plywood, uh, so the one side is finished grade, the other side needs a little bit of help. We're going to use the finished grade side for the underside of the top, and the other side will be the side that we glue up with to the 3/4. The 3/4 inch panel that I used was from an old project we tore out of our house, and I believe this had some of that self-adhesive tile stuck to it. So this is me going through belt after belt after belt, trying to get the gum off. Do a pretty good job. It doesn't come off 100%, but it doesn't affect the final glue up in the end. This is a piece of Douglas fir that we're going to be using for the dividers that will make up the storage underneath the tabletop. Like I said, this is going to be a table that will sit next to a salad bar, and it will be used for a soup pot, extra dishes, soup cups, silverware, napkins, that sort of thing. Next up, we are milling a piece of southern yellow pine. Um, this will be used for the bottom of the table, what the storage will sit on. This will also be used as the center divider between all of the other dividers. You'll get an idea here in a little bit once we get everything else milled up. We were just going through a little bit more of the milling process on the Douglas fir dividers, getting things cut a little bit closer to final dimension, making sure everything's good and square. Label your parts. Can't say it enough. I don't do it enough, but I need to do better. I think we all go through this phase where we know what we need to do. We've done it how many times, but yet we all stare off into space, making sure that we're doing the right thing, measuring 3 times before we cut anything once. This is one thing that I've learned from watching a lot of YouTube videos. I am not alone. We are not alone. It happens to all of us. I believe here we are milling up the 3 pieces of southern yellow pine that will make up the bottom. This will be another panel glue up. I believe the piece that we were working with before was definitively the center divider though. If you couldn't guess, this is my very first YouTube video I have ever uploaded outlining a build. Um, if you have any suggestions of content that you guys might want to see in the future, feel free to leave it in the comments. I do have a couple of other upcoming projects I'll be working on. I will be filming them. I'll try to be making YouTube videos for them. I don't know if this will become a thing, but if it does, it does. Here we are gluing the 3/4 inch plywood and the 1/2 inch plywood together. It's a guest appearance by Uncle Ray. As I said earlier, this being my first YouTube video, you're going to find out I'm not very good at this. Here we are gluing up the panels, and once we get this glue set, we step away for the 15 or so minutes that it takes to get this tacked up. And either when we came back, I didn't start recording, or the battery died, or the memory card filled up. But this is all the video footage we have of this process. Fortunately, everything went well with the glue up, nothing delaminated, and here we are now just sizing up the bottom of the storage to match up with the top of the table, and we're going to get that panel all glued up as well. I use biscuits for my joinery. I don't have any other fancier tool to do this with, but uh, this has served me just fine over the years. I've never had any problems with panels falling apart, exploding, or getting paid less money because I didn't have green tools. You're going to find there's a lot of repetition in woodworking, specifically with making rectangles. Um, I don't know how many of these panel glue ups we have left. I think at least one more, but it's the same process. Mill the parts, make them flat, make them square, cut them to size, cut your biscuits, glue them up, clamp them up, wait overnight. Wash, rinse, repeat. Now, when I say repeat, this is not what I mean. I got the panel all glued up, got the biscuits put in, and I realized I put the biscuits in both sides of one of the glue ups. Um, you only need them in the one side, of course, and most of them popped out just fine, as you can see. However, the last few were not so nice. I have a feeling this is not the last time that's going to happen. Here we are milling up some of the material that will be the legs. This was basically just 2x6 material that I found laying around. We cut it to the length we needed. Found some decent boards. There's a couple things wrong with them, but again, this isn't fine furniture. Um, Once we get these all planed up, squared up, down to their needed size, we're gonna get them glued up. Here we are setting up to get the dados um, milled into the tabletop. However, this is another one of those clips that's probably out of order, and we'll get into this in a little bit greater detail here in just a little bit in the video. All right, this set of legs was dried overnight, so we're going to pull those out of the clamps. And we wash, rinse, repeat with the other set of legs, getting those clamped up. The panel was dried up, so we're going to pull that out of clamps as well. I don't know how well this goes over, but I bought these DeWalt biscuits and they're garbage. They're inconsistent. I had to sand down, I can't tell you how many of them. Some of them fit loose. Some of them were too tight, as you could tell in that one clip. I had to literally smash one of them to get them out of the hole. So I just buy the whatever brand the hardware store has. Our hardware store is a do it best hardware store. So they work great. They're really consistent. Here we are back with the center divider, and we're making up the jig that will allow us to route the dado to accept this in the underside of the tabletop. This jig is basically made up of some scrap plywood. Um, we sandwich it around the center divider, screw it together with a couple of other smaller scraps, and we figure out the overall thickness that we need. I believe I'm going to end up laminating a couple of other pieces of plywood to the top of this. The router bit that I have is a 1-inch router bit with a top bearing, so I need to get more thickness. I only need to route into this tabletop about a quarter of an inch. So with a 1-inch bit, I have to kind of make up the difference. Here's where I realize I need a little bit more thickness, and I'm milling up a couple of other scrap pieces of plywood to adhere to the top. We're just using the blue tape and CA glue trick for this. That way they're easy to take apart. I believe this is where I realized I screwed up yet again, and well, had to take everything apart. All right, here we are with the new scrap pieces, and we're going to remill them, and we will reattach them the same way we did the old ones. The blue tape and CA glue. Wish me luck. Just cleaning up the edges of that southern yellow pine and giving it a quick test fit. We got a little bit of chiseling to do on the ends, but all in all, that worked out real good. We are making up the jig to cut the dados for the Douglas fir dividers. There will be 3 Douglas fir dividers on each side of the center divider. That'll give us a total of 4 cubbies across. The 2 end cubbies will be open to the ends as well. And I'm not sure what the access is going to be like since the legs are going to partially be in the way, but yeah, we'll find out. We are trying to make this jig so we can use it on the bottom as well. What we'll need to do is we'll need to route matching dados into another uh, panel that we had glued up um, to accept the center board as well as the smaller dividers. And they're going to have to match up pretty much perfectly. And I'm hoping to be able to reuse this jig. And as you can see, when I screw this one down, I'm using the center groove that we had dadoed into it to keep it in there, and it's not going to move around. We don't have to worry about clamps, but yeah, I probably overbuilt this jig, but it worked out in the end. I'm tacking in a couple of small strips at the ends here. These dados don't go all the way through. They have to stop at a certain point. There's going to be about an inch and a half of overhang over the from the tabletop over the dividers, so we don't want to go off of this. And so we just tacked in a couple pieces of Luan there, and that worked out real good. And then we just wash, rinse, repeat with the other dados. All that's left is to square up these ends and make sure that our Douglas fir dividers sit in there snug. Now we are reusing the same jig we just used on the top to route the dados into the center divider. The Douglas fir dividers will nest into these, so we need to make these dados about, I think we figured on about 3/16 of an inch. The piece of southern yellow is about an inch thick, but we didn't want to get it to where the middle is too thin since this does have to give it a little bit of structural support. And again, once we have our depths set, we just mark out where the dados need to go and move the jig down, making the dados that we need. Again, wash, rinse, repeat. The unique thing about this is we did repeat it on the opposite side of the board as well. So, and this gives us a glimpse at what this is going to look like. The center divider nests into that center dado. The Douglas fir dividers nest into the center divider, as well as, in this case, the underside of the tabletop. And now we're just getting everything marked out for size so we can mill these to their final dimensions. Wasn't any sense in showing you me cross-cut a piece of wood on the table saw. Again, we've seen that a million times. However, the dados did turn out really good. Now, the only thing that's left is to ensure that we get them to match up as well with the bottom piece that we milled up. I think this is a good time to bring up the fact that I have superpowers. Not superpowers in the traditional sense, but they're basically useless. For instance, my superpower is splinters. I can get splinters anywhere, anytime. Most of the time, they end up underneath my fingernails. However, in this case, I was fortunate. It was just a small inch and a half long sliver that went into my palm at the base of my pointer finger. And yeah, no harm, no foul. I will, however, give you a little bit of a warning. If you're squeamish at all, look away. But to be fair, this is not bad at all. Yeah. And so we carry on. Wash, rinse, repeat. Scrape off the glue. sand the board, wash, rinse, repeat. Here we are unclamping the other blank of legs. Pretty sure I missed the footage getting these milled up to their final dimensions. All right, this is my track saw. It's a big old chunk of scrap plywood that I found laying around. It's not flat. The one edge is square, or I should say the two edges are parallel. The bottom cleat is square with it, but that's because I make it square every so often. And this is how I pretty much square up my panels without a track saw, a proper track saw. Now we just get that panel milled up to its final dimensions, and we can push forward with the getting dados cut in it. As I mentioned a little bit earlier, we use a lot of referential measurements. Um, I know it's important to have things milled up to a specific size. However, I think we all know that getting two things exactly the same size is never easy. So we just try to make them as close as we can and make the parts fit. Um, we do measure for center, that sort of thing, but we also make sure that it looks right as well. We've got that old jig back. We're going to use that for the center line, and we'll use the shorter jig that we used for the center, or not for the center dividers, but for the smaller Douglas fir dividers to go off of the center. Similarly with the other uh, dados we've cut, the ends of this need to stop short of the end. We don't want them to protrude out past the end of the panel. So we're going to put some stops on there, make sure that they don't go all the way through. Oh, here we are again, padding out that jig. Probably should have left this alone after the last time I used it, but yeah, not much foresight. All right, we'll cut those ends so they're nice and square, and we'll move on to cutting the rabbets across the panel. We made a modification to this jig so it will basically just slide down and we can get a couple clamps to keep it secured as opposed to screwing it down to this panel. Something we did not do for the other panels since a couple of screw holes didn't really matter. We could fill those easily with some putty, but on this, we figured the less we had to do, the better. The one problem that we found with this jig was it was a little bit too short, so we found it was easier to just stop short and uh, cut and chisel out the ends so it didn't end up blowing out. Plus, the southern yellow pine is kind of splintery, as you have seen before. So we figured this was an easier, cleaner way to get the end protrusions finished up. Okay, here we see things starting to come together a little bit. Center dividers in, short dividers are in, everything lines up nice. We bring the top piece on, and after just a little bit of maneuvering, it sits together just fine. Now that top was not flat, however, um, clamping it down does make it flat. Now we are starting to assemble the top, which will basically be the tabletop, the center dividers, and the bottom of the top, if that makes sense. Yeah, I realize this is a pretty long video. Um, Try to think of ways to shorten it up. Went through the footage, I can't tell you how many times, but again, this is my first video, so if you believe that a video like this would be better in a couple different parts, let me know in the comments. If there's anything that you would have liked to have seen more detail on, again, let me know in the comments. I can always go through the footage and maybe dig up certain parts of the build and maybe outline them a little bit finer detail for you in a future video. While this did go very well, I did kind of bugger this up a little bit in that I did not clamp the top down. So we had a bit of an issue with the drill bits breaking out uh, in the heads of the screws. We basically just used Spax um, cabinet screws for all of this. Nice wide head, a little bit of a thinner screw, but it didn't need to be real structural. It just needed to hold everything together. And this plywood flattened out pretty easily, so it worked out good. Here we are starting the process of attaching the legs. We're going to notch out the bottom of the storage to accept the legs, and then we are going to um, chisel out some mortises in the legs. So there's about a half an inch of material inside the leg for stability. We don't have an apron at the top of the legs like a traditional table would, so I felt this was probably the best method to attach the legs. We're going to basically screw through the tabletop into the end grain of the leg, and in the bottom divider, um, mortise and tenon the legs in and secure that with a pocket screw. We're also going to have a shelf at the bottom of the legs about 4 inches up off the floor. A for stability, but B for additional storage. We're using more referential measurements for these. Like I said, the top is not perfectly flat. The bottom of the storage is very flat. Um, but we still just use referential measurements to get our um, the rough location for where we're going to chisel out the notch in the legs. All right, fast forward. Again, first time making a YouTube video. I don't know what happened with the footage of me cutting the notches at the top. However, I do believe I have the footage of me cutting the notches for the bottom shelf. Here we are just laying out where we want to locate the screws to attach the legs to the top and make sure that everything fits good. We're just milling up some white pine for this bottom shelf. I believe we just put a couple boards together to get the width. And again, we're going to use the biscuits to join these together. Again, more of the same. Cut rectangles, put biscuits in them, glue them up, clamp them up, wait. And more reference marks to locate where the notches need to go for the bottom shelf. The bottom shelf was milled up to be the exact same size as the bottom of the storage, so they should line up pretty good. And here we are just cleaning those marks up a little bit so they're not so jagged. Easiest way I found to get these corners cut out from before, I think you saw, I'm using a flush trim saw here. I didn't really like this method, so when I do the next one, I think I get my larger pull saw out. But this worked really well. It gave a nice clean cut, and again, these are going to get notched inside leg, so this doesn't really need to be pretty. We just need to make sure that it's the right size so it fits into the notch that we cut into the leg. We are laying out the lines in the leg for the notches in the bottom, for the bottom shelf, I should say. Again, we measure from the top of the leg down to get the location of the notch, but then we use a lot of referential measurements based off of the thickness of the bottom shelf, distances, this sort of thing. It's all approximate, but I think that the notches turned out really really well. There's really not any gaps. It was they were good and tight. So I have to apologize for the camera work again. First YouTube video, and the focus doesn't always stay great. But here we have a bit of a close-up shot of how those notches turned out in the first half. Uh, Kind of gives you an idea of the layout lines that we put on there as guides. But the first notches that we pulled out of this bottom, they turned out pretty good. Like I said, this is all 2x6 material, so pine is pretty easy to chisel. It's not like we're hammering through end grain of white oak or anything. But yeah, it's coming along. All right, that leg's about finished up. Here's what that notch looked like. And again, this is more wash, rinse, repeat on the other three. There's a close-up of what it looks like from the bottom. This is upside down, so gravity is kind of working in our favor, so to speak. But if there were a gap, you would see it on this side of it, as opposed to if we flip it over, if there was a gap, you would see it on the other side. And now we basically just start getting everything assembled again, make sure everything works as we expect it to, or should say fits as we expect it to. And I wish I had a nickel for every time I assembled this and took it apart. I would like to note, when we do assemble this for dry assembly, we don't tighten everything down. We don't want to take a risk at stripping out screws or something to that effect and having to, you know, re-drill and pin to make new screw holes. So all of this is, to this point, has been put together uh, uh, loosely, so to speak. And I think for our final glue ups or our final assemblies, we make sure everything is good and tight. And here's a first glimpse at what it's going to look like fully assembled. All right, so from here on out, I'm shooting with a new camera. I got a Sony camera that I use for taking portraitures and whatnot, but it also does 4K video. I don't know what video setting I have this set to. I know it's not 4K. But the remainder of this video is going to be shot with this camera. The lighting is a bit weird with it. I gotta still monkey with the settings. So we'll figure all that out and just hang in there with us. As you can see here, now we're laminating the cherry veneer top to the tabletop using contact cement. Basically, this is rigid enough. We don't have to have a bunch of spacers. We just used one at each end. Clamp down the one side once we had it lined up. Clamp down the other side once we've rolled it out. And this goes pretty well. We used some calls for the center dividers, or should say for the center clamps, and then just went around the perimeter with some smaller clamps to make sure that it stayed in place. You may also notice that it has a coat of primer. Um, we didn't record us painting the primer on this table. We didn't figure that was anything exciting, but it's just regular, everyday, run-of-the-mill primer. Here we are milling up the cherry that's going to go around the perimeter of the tabletop. We're going to miter the corners and just glue and tack this in place. Here I am prepping to flush trim the cherry veneer top to the rest of the tabletop. I put a piece of blue tape on there just as a, I don't know, a couple thousandths uh, of a spacer so I don't dig into the plywood. It gives the top just a hair more thickness, but it's not really required. During this routing, we were doing a normal cut, uh, but about a third of the way up there, I got a catch and it ripped the piece out, so I decided to finish it up with a climbing cut. Don't really recommend doing climbing cuts with the router unless you can really control it. Again, this was 1/4 inch cherry veneer, not a lot of danger of it kicking, and I was in pretty good control, so. If you've made it this far in the video, thank you for sticking around. I know this was a long one. For a first video, I don't know if it's too long. I don't know if it's too short. I watch a lot of really long videos. I don't mind sitting for an hour at a time. However, the one thing I do not like on YouTube is ads. I do not have target-based ads enabled on this video, so if you do get ads, I would love to know what they were. We are starting to get the edge banding attached. Again, just screws and pin nails, and we'll put the clamps on there just to make sure it doesn't move. But that's all we need to do for this part. You may notice as I'm putting this together that there's a small scrap piece of wood. Basically, I took a piece of the cherry stock that's the same size, cut a 45 on it, and we use that as a guide, a referential measurement, so to speak, to locate where we're going to cut the miters for the corners so the sides match up perfect, or as perfect as you can make them. And there we have it. It's all assembled. The top is attached. The edge banding's on. Once that dries, we'll finish sand that top, and that should be about it, really. We paint the bottom of this with a cabinet paint. It is designed to dry with an enamel type finish, so it's more resistant to chipping, wear and tear, that sort of thing. Plus it cleans up easy, and again, this is going to be in a restaurant, so we felt this was probably the best avenue to take. And now we paint on the highlight colors, and the paint portion of this is done. And just a little bit of finish sand into the top, and it's ready for some poly. We used Helmsman's. I think we used the gloss finish for this. All right, and there you have it. I did not record or lost the footage of me finishing the top. This is the last portion of the paint. We're just touching up the green on this, going over the end of the dividers and touching up any parts that just need to be touched up. I would really like to thank you guys for sticking around to the end of the video. And like I said, if there's any other content that you might like to see, or if there's any comments about this video, please leave them below. I'm going to leave you with a small slideshow of this thing finished up, and I think there might even be a picture of it in its final home. Thanks. We'll catch you on the next one.